My name's Clara, and I'm 19 years old now. But when I think back on my teenage years, the one thing that stands out the most isn't school or friends, or even all those awkward moments growing up. It's Titan, my dog, my best friend, my constant companion. I grew up in a small, quiet town called Silverbrook, the kind of place where everyone knows each other and life moves at a slower pace. I've always been an only child, which meant most of my time at home was spent on my own, surrounded by books, hobbies, or whatever I could find to entertain myself. But honestly, no amount of TV shows or books could compare to what I felt was missing. I wanted a dog, a real friend who'd be there with me no matter what. It wasn't just a passing idea. I'd see dogs in the neighborhood or on TV, those loyal eyes, wagging tails, happy energy, and I couldn't help but feel drawn to them. I started asking my parents for a dog when I was around 14. At first, they brushed it off. You know, typical parental concerns. Dogs are a big responsibility. They need time, care, training, and so on. They were especially worried when I told them I wanted a big dog. Not just any big dog, but a Great Dane. Most people think of Great Danes and imagine these massive, towering dogs that take up half the room, and my parents were no different. They kept telling me it might be too much for me to handle, especially since I'd never had a pet before. But I didn't give up. I kept showing them photos, reading about how sweet and gentle Great Danes actually are, and promising I'd do everything: walks, feeding, training, cleaning up. I think they finally gave in because they saw how serious I was, not just about wanting a dog, but about being ready to take care of one. So, one sunny afternoon, they surprised me by saying we'd be visiting a dog breeder just outside town. I remember feeling like I could barely breathe. I was so excited. The moment we arrived at the place, I heard the noise first. A chorus of barks, yelps, little tails wagging everywhere. It was like walking into a whirlwind of energy. There were so many puppies running around, all shapes and sizes, but there was one that caught my eye immediately. This tiny Great Dane puppy, with soft gray fur and big, curious eyes, stood out from the crowd. Even though he was small then, you could already tell he'd grow up to be this tall, impressive dog. But there was something in his eyes, a kind of calmness mixed with curiosity, that made me stop in my tracks. I walked over, crouched down, and as soon as I reached my hand out, he nudged it with his nose like he already knew me. Right then and there, I felt this weird sense of connection, like we understood each other without saying a word. I looked up at my parents, and even though they exchanged one of those worried glances, they smiled and said, "Okay, he's the one." Bringing Titan home was one of the happiest moments of my life. We named him Titan, partly because of his breed. He was destined to grow big and strong, but also because of his gentle, steady energy. Those first few days, everything felt new and exciting. Titan was playful, a little clumsy, always curious about everything in the house. He'd follow me around from room to room, trying to climb onto the sofa, chewing on my shoelaces, tilting his head every time I talked to him. Training him became our daily routine. I taught him simple commands: sit, stay, come, and he picked them up faster than I expected. It didn't feel like a chore at all. If anything, it was like we were learning together, figuring each other out day by day. I'd take him on walks around Silverbrook, and soon enough, he became a familiar face in the neighborhood. People would smile when they saw him because he had this friendly, calm vibe. And even though he kept growing taller every month, he was always gentle, especially with kids or older folks we'd pass by. But the bond between me and Titan wasn't just about walks or tricks. It was more than that. Whenever I had a rough day, whether it was stress from school, arguments with friends, or just feeling down, Titan was there. He had this way of quietly sitting next to me, his head resting on my knee. those big brown eyes looking up at me like he understood everything without needing to hear a word. There were nights when I'd lie in bed, overthinking everything, and Titan would curl up at the foot of my bed, his steady breathing calming me down. It sounds simple, but it meant the world to me. He wasn't just a pet. He became family, a steady presence in a world that sometimes felt unpredictable or overwhelming. Looking back, I realize how much Titan shaped those years for me. I was just a teenager trying to figure life out, and having him by my side made me feel less alone. He taught me a lot without me even realizing it: how to be patient, how to care for another living being, how to be present in the moment. I'd always thought that adopting a dog would be about me taking care of him. But honestly, there were so many times it felt like he was the one taking care of me. The quiet moments, the little routines, the simple comfort of knowing he was always there. They made a bigger impact on me than I can put into words. Even now, as I'm older and life's gotten a bit more complicated, those memories of Titan still stand out clearly in my mind. Every time I think about that day we first met at the breeder's place, or the long walks through Silverbrook's quiet streets, I feel grateful. It's funny how sometimes the most unexpected connections end up becoming the most meaningful parts of your life. Titan wasn't just a pet. He was my best friend, my anchor, and a reminder that love and loyalty often show up in the simplest, most genuine ways. It's funny how something as simple as a dog walking into your life can end up meaning so much more than you ever expected. After Titan came home with us, life felt completely different. I mean, I always knew I'd be happy to have a dog. I'd wanted one for so long, but I didn't realize just how deep the bond between us would grow. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It built itself slowly, naturally, like the way the sun comes up each morning without you even noticing it first. Those early days were filled with little moments that just stitched us closer together without me even realizing it. Every morning, I'd wake up to find Titan already awake, his big eyes watching me, tail thumping softly against the floor. He never barked or made a fuss. It was like he was just waiting patiently, knowing the day would begin when I was ready. And once I was up, there was no question. We had our routine. First, breakfast. I'd scoop his food while he sat there, tail wagging, looking like he was trying to act polite but couldn't hide how excited he was. Then we'd head out for a walk through Silverbrook's quiet streets. Titan grew fast. Every month he seemed taller, stronger, but he never lost that gentle way about him. People in the neighborhood got used to seeing us together. Some of the older folks would wave from their porches. Kids would run up and ask if they could pet him, and he'd always sit still, letting them pat his head while he wagged his tail. There was something about him that made people relax instantly. Maybe it was the calm look in his eyes, or how he never pulled on the leash, always matching his pace to mine. But it wasn't just about how he acted in public. It was the quiet times at home that really made me realize how much Titan meant to me. After school, when I'd come back tired or frustrated, Titan would be right there by the door, waiting. No matter what kind of day I'd had, whether I'd flunked a test, argued with someone, or just felt out of sorts, he didn't care. He never judged. He'd just follow me around, lie down beside me, and listen without needing words. I could sit there in silence, running my fingers through his soft fur, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, and somehow everything seemed a little easier to handle. It felt like he understood in a way no one else could. As months turned into years, Titan became more than just a dog to me. He felt like family, like a piece of my own heart walking beside me. Whenever I had something on my mind, whether it was small worries or bigger things I didn't feel comfortable telling anyone else, I found myself talking to him. Sounds silly, right? Talking to a dog? But with Titan, it never felt that way. He'd tilt his head, look at me with those big brown eyes, and even though he couldn't answer, it felt like he got it. Like he was saying, I'm here. You're not alone. There's something powerful about having someone, or even some creature, there for you without conditions, without needing anything from you except your presence. One of my favorite things was taking Titan out to the old meadow just outside Silverbrook. It was this wide, open space with tall grass and a little stream running through it. On weekends, especially when the weather was nice, I'd pack a little bag with snacks and water, and we'd spend hours out there. Titan loved it. He'd run ahead, ears flapping, tail wagging like crazy, and then come trotting back to me, tongue hanging out, completely happy. I'd lie in the grass and watch the clouds while he rested his head on my lap, both of us just soaking in the peace of it all. Those moments felt endless, like nothing in the world could touch us. It wasn't about doing anything special. It was just about being together, in sync. No need for words. The funny thing is, the more time I spent with Titan, the more I realized how much he shaped who I was becoming. He taught me patience in ways I hadn't expected. Like when he was still young and learning not to chew on shoes, or when I had to take him out in the rain because he refused to use the yard, or when I'd be busy with homework and he'd nudge me gently with his nose, reminding me to take a break and just breathe for a second. It was little things, but they added up. He made me slower to anger, quicker to forgive. It's hard to stay upset when there's this big, goofy dog looking at you like you're the best person in the world. Another thing I learned from Titan was responsibility. Taking care of him wasn't always easy. There were vet visits, early mornings, late nights when he'd be sick or restless. There were days when I didn't feel like going out, but I knew he needed his walk. Days when I'd rather lie in bed, but his soft whine by the door told me he was waiting. But instead of feeling like a chore, it felt good to be needed. Knowing that he relied on me gave me a sense of purpose, like I mattered in this small but meaningful way. The thing about our friendship was that it didn't ask anything complicated of me. It was simple, steady, always there. When people around me changed, friends moving away, relationships shifting, school getting harder, Titan stayed the same. Loyal, gentle, a solid presence I could count on. And maybe that's why our bond felt so unbreakable. Because in a world where everything feels like it's constantly moving, growing, or slipping out of your grasp, Titan was a reminder that some things don't have to change. Some connections are just meant to be. There were nights when I'd lie awake, listening to the soft sound of his breathing, feeling this quiet sense of peace settle over me, and I'd think about how lucky I was to have him in my life. Not everyone gets a friend like that. Someone who sees you at your worst, who doesn't care about your flaws, who's just there, always, no matter what. Titan wasn't just my dog. He was my anchor, my safe place. And in those moments, I knew deep down that no matter where life took me, no matter how much things might change in the future, the friendship we shared would always be a part of me. I guess when you're really close to someone, or even a dog like Titan, you start noticing every little change, even the ones that seem too small to mention. That's how it began, these subtle shifts between me and Titan. It wasn't something that hit me all at once. It crept in slowly, so quietly, that at first, I didn't even realize anything was changing. But looking back, I can see how the way I felt around him, and maybe even how he acted around me, started to shift in small ways. We still had our routines, our walks, our lazy afternoons lying in the yard or sitting by the window. Titan still greeted me the same way every morning, still waited by the door when I came home. But sometimes, when I'd catch him looking at me, there was something different in his eyes. It wasn't the usual playful spark or that calm, steady gaze I'd gotten so used to. There was something deeper, something thoughtful, almost like he was trying to figure something out about me, the same way I was quietly starting to figure something out about him. It sounds strange, I know, talking about a dog like that, but Titan had always been more than just a pet to me. He was family. And maybe that's why I noticed these small changes, like how he started sitting a little closer than usual, resting his head on my leg and not moving away even when I shifted. Or how his ears would perk up when I said his name, but instead of instantly wagging his tail or jumping up, he'd pause, watching me with this careful kind of attention, as if he was reading something in my face I didn't even realize was there. There were days when I felt a little out of it, stressed about school, wondering what I was going to do after graduation, feeling like everyone around me had their lives figured out while I was stuck in the same place. And on those days, Titan seemed to pick up on my moods even more. He'd stick by my side like glue, following me from room to room, quietly keeping watch without needing me to say anything. One afternoon stands out in my memory. It was a quiet Sunday, the kind of day where the whole house feels still, like time itself is slowing down. My parents were out visiting friends, so it was just me and Titan. I was sitting on the back steps, looking out at the yard, lost in my thoughts. Titan came over and sat next to me, but instead of lying down like he usually did, he just stayed sitting, his shoulder pressed lightly against mine. I didn't say anything at first, just kept staring at the trees swaying in the breeze. But then I glanced over at him, and the way he was looking at me, there was something about it that felt different. Not just loyal or sweet, but almost like he was waiting for me to say something. Like he could sense I had something bottled up inside. I reached out, ran my hand over his fur, and sighed. I didn't have the words for what I was feeling, but it was like Titan already knew. After that day, I started noticing more of these moments. Tiny things, but they added up. Like how Titan seemed more attentive, more in tune with whatever was going on in my head. If I stayed up late, restless, unable to sleep, he'd be there, lying by the foot of my bed, but with his eyes open, like he was keeping watch. If I felt anxious or overwhelmed, he'd nudge me gently with his nose, reminding me to take a breath. It was almost like the bond we shared had shifted into something unspoken, something deeper. It wasn't just me taking care of him anymore. It felt like he was looking out for me in his own quiet way. And then, without meaning to, I realized I was starting to lean on him more. When I'd come home from school feeling drained, I'd sit down on the floor beside him instead of heading straight to my room. I'd find myself talking to him about things I hadn't even told my friends, stuff about my future, how unsure I felt, how sometimes I wondered if I was really ready to leave this little town behind. It wasn't like he could answer, obviously, but there was comfort in just saying it out loud, knowing he wouldn't judge or offer advice or tell me to stop overthinking. He'd just listen, his big brown eyes calm and steady, like whatever I had to say mattered. Titan, in his own way, became my anchor in a world that felt like it was constantly shifting. But as much as I appreciated that comfort, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about us had changed, even if I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. I'd catch myself wondering if he felt it too. This quiet shift, this new kind of closeness that wasn't exactly like before. Maybe it was just me growing up, realizing how important he really was to me. Or maybe it was the fact that life felt like it was speeding up, with graduation looming and the idea of leaving home becoming more real every day. Either way, there were moments when I felt like Titan and I were communicating on some deeper level, one that didn't need words. There was another evening I remember clearly. It had been a long day, one of those days where nothing seemed to go right. I had gotten into an argument with one of my closest friends, something silly, but it left me feeling off. I came home, dropped my bag by the door, and just sank onto the living room floor without even turning the lights on. It was quiet, except for the faint ticking of the clock. And then, as always, Titan padded over, sat down next to me, and leaned against my shoulder. I could feel the weight of him, solid and steady, and without thinking, I buried my face in his fur. I didn't cry or say anything, but I felt this wave of calm settle over me. Like no matter how messy things felt outside, here in this moment, everything was okay. Titan didn't move, didn't ask anything of me. He just stayed right there, like he knew that's exactly what I needed. That's how it was with us. No big dramatic moments, just small, steady shifts. Little things that slowly deepened the bond between us without me realizing how much they mattered. Over time, I stopped thinking of Titan as just my dog. He became something more, a constant, a quiet presence that grounded me when everything else felt uncertain. And maybe that's what made the shifts feel so noticeable. Because as life started pulling me toward new places, new responsibilities, there was a part of me that clung to the familiarity of what we had, to the quiet understanding that had grown between us over the years. Even now, when I think back to those days, it's those subtle shifts that stand out the most. The way Titan seemed to sense when I needed him, how he adjusted without me ever having to ask. How, without realizing it, I started to depend on him in ways I hadn't before. It's strange how relationships evolve like that, not all at once, but in tiny, almost invisible ways until one day you look back and realize how much deeper they've grown. I thought I understood the bond Titan and I shared. After years of being together, it felt like there wasn't much that could shake what we had. But then there was this one moment, one little incident, that really made me stop and question things in a way I hadn't before. It's strange how something so simple can throw you off balance, like a pebble tossed into calm water that sends ripples farther than you expect. It happened on a regular Sunday morning. Nothing unusual about it at first. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and Titan and I headed out for one of our usual walks. We took the same path through Silverbrook, past the rows of houses and quiet streets, eventually making our way to Riverdale Park. Titan loved that park. It was wide and open, with big trees and a little pond where ducks gathered. Normally, he'd trot along beside me, tail wagging, ears perked, stopping occasionally to sniff at a bush or chase a stray leaf. Everything seemed the same, calm, familiar, easy, until it wasn't. We'd just rounded a corner when Titan suddenly froze. At first I thought maybe he'd spotted a squirrel or another dog, but when I looked ahead, I saw her. A stunning Great Dane, probably just a little older than Titan, with this sleek golden coat that almost shimmered in the sunlight. She moved gracefully, like she owned the ground she walked on, completely unaware of us at first. Titan's entire posture changed the second he saw her. His ears stood straight up, his tail wagged low and fast, and his eyes locked on her like nothing else in the world mattered. Before I could react, Titan pulled hard on the leash, way harder than usual. Normally, he was so well-behaved, never one to tug or drag me. But this time, it was like something instinctual had taken over. I stumbled forward, trying to keep hold, my heart pounding. Not just because I wasn't expecting it, but because it felt like for the first time, Titan wasn't focused on me at all. I called his name, sharp and clear. "Titan, stop!" But it was like he didn't hear me. He just kept pulling, eyes fixed on that other dog. There was something about how determined he looked that unsettled me, like I'd suddenly become invisible. My grip tightened, and I dug in my heels, finally managing to halt him long enough for the other dog and her owner to disappear down another path. Only then did Titan slow down, glancing back at me, his ears dropping slightly, like he finally realized I was there. I remember looking into his eyes in that moment and seeing something I hadn't noticed before, an odd mixture of excitement, confusion, and maybe even guilt. It hit me in a weird way. This dog, who had always been so focused on me, so tuned in to my moods and feelings, had been completely lost in his own world, chasing something I couldn't quite understand. We finished the walk quietly after that. Titan stuck closer to me, walking calmly like usual. But something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that something between us had shifted, even if just slightly. I knew logically it wasn't a big deal. Dogs get distracted by other dogs all the time. But it wasn't the act itself that stuck with me. It was how it made me feel. For the first time, I wondered if maybe I'd been assuming too much about our bond, about how unshakable it really was. It left this little seed of doubt, like maybe there were parts of Titan I didn't fully understand, pieces of him that weren't entirely mine. When we got home, Titan flopped down in his usual spot by the door, his head resting on his paws. He glanced up at me now and then, his eyes softer, like he was sensing that something wasn't quite right. I tried to shake it off, telling myself not to overthink, but later that evening, the feeling came back stronger. I sat on the living room floor, Titan beside me, his head leaning lightly against my knee like always. But I noticed how quiet I felt, how much was swirling around in my head. I found myself wondering if Titan had spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about that other dog. I wondered if, in his world, something had changed the same way it had in mine. It felt silly, almost childish, to be bothered by it, but I couldn't help it. That night, when I crawled into bed, Titan came into my room like usual. He circled once, twice, and then settled down at the foot of my bed, close enough that I could feel the rise and fall of his breathing. Normally, that comforted me, but this time, I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling strangely restless. I kept thinking about the way he had pulled on the leash, how focused he had been on something other than me. It left me with this odd, hollow feeling I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't about jealousy, not exactly, but more about realizing that even in the closest bonds, there are moments when you're not entirely in sync. The next morning, everything seemed back to normal. Titan was his usual self, tail wagging, following me around, nuzzling my hand whenever I paused long enough. And yet, that lingering thought remained in the back of my mind. Maybe it wasn't about the other dog at all. Maybe it was more about me realizing that no relationship, no matter how close, is completely without its cracks, its unpredictable moments. It forced me to reflect a little, to think about how even the strongest connections are made up of two separate beings, each with their own instincts, desires, and thoughts. I didn't bring it up to anyone, of course. It felt silly to explain why one little incident had stuck with me so much. But in the quiet moments that followed over the next few weeks, I noticed myself paying more attention to Titan, watching for other signs, wondering if things between us would shift again. And slowly, I realized that part of loving someone, whether it's a person or a dog, means accepting that they have their own world too. That no matter how deep your bond runs, there will be moments when they're pulled by something else, something you can't control. It doesn't make the connection weaker, it just makes it real. Looking back, I think that day at Riverdale Park taught me something I hadn't expected. It was a test, not of Titan's loyalty or affection, but of my ability to trust the bond we'd built, even when it felt momentarily shaken. It reminded me that relationships aren't perfect, and that's okay. They're made up of all these little moments, some easy, some confusing, some that leave you questioning, and it's how you move forward afterward that matters most. Titan and I kept walking the same paths, sharing the same quiet afternoons. And if anything, that small moment made me appreciate our friendship even more, knowing it was strong enough to weather even the unexpected shifts. It's strange how life has a way of creeping up on you when you're not paying attention. For the longest time, I thought things between me and Titan would stay the same forever. We had our routines, our quiet understanding, and it felt like nothing could break that. But as I got closer to finishing high school, reality started to tap on my shoulder, reminding me that nothing stays frozen in place. I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself that I had plenty of time before I had to think about the next step, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Every day felt like a countdown ticking in the back of my mind, and the more I tried to pretend everything was fine, the more that uneasy feeling grew. It started small, just conversations here and there about college applications, plans for the future, my parents casually asking if I'd thought about where I wanted to go. I'd nod and give vague answers, not because I didn't care, but because part of me was avoiding the truth. I knew what leaving meant. It didn't just mean stepping out into the world, finding my place, and chasing my dreams. It meant leaving behind the life I'd built so comfortably, the one where Titan had become such a huge part of me. There were days when I'd sit on the porch with Titan lying beside me, the sun setting over Silverbrook, and I'd catch myself wondering how I was ever supposed to walk away from this. How do you leave behind something so familiar, so safe? Titan never asked me to stay, of course. He couldn't understand the conversations about moving away or starting fresh in a city miles from home. But somehow, it felt like he knew. Maybe it was the way he'd rest his head on my lap a little longer, or how he watched me with those deep, steady eyes whenever I sat quiet, lost in thought. I'd reach down, run my hand through his soft fur, and feel my chest tighten, wondering if he sensed that something was changing. I remember the day the letter arrived, the acceptance letter from a college in a different state. My parents were thrilled, congratulating me, telling me how proud they were. I smiled, thanked them, played along like everything was perfect. But later that night, when I was alone in my room, Titan curled up at the foot of my bed like always. It hit me. I stared at the letter, reading the words over and over, and all I could think about was how it marked the start of something new and the end of something I wasn't ready to let go of. For hours, I lay awake, my hand resting on Titan's back, listening to his steady breathing. It felt like the world was moving forward without asking if I was ready. Over the next few weeks, things started to feel different. My parents and I talked more about what I needed to prepare, about what moving away would look like. They helped me shop for dorm essentials, made lists of things I'd need to pack, and every time they brought it up, I'd nod along, going through the motions. But inside, I felt like I was standing still while everything else was speeding up. Titan, as always, stayed close, his quiet presence grounding me even when my mind felt like it was spinning. But I noticed myself pulling back a little, not because I wanted to, but because it felt easier than facing the reality of what was coming. There were moments when I'd catch myself sitting on the floor beside him, trying to memorize every little thing, the way he leaned against me, the weight of his head on my knee, the warmth of his fur beneath my hand. It was like I was afraid I'd forget all of it once I was gone. One afternoon, not long before I was supposed to leave, I decided to take Titan out to the meadow outside town one last time. It had always been our place, somewhere away from everything, where it felt like time didn't matter. The weather was perfect. Blue sky, soft breeze, sunlight filtering through the trees. Titan ran ahead, like he always did, chasing after nothing in particular, and I followed slowly, watching him. I tried not to think about how different things would be in a few weeks, but it was impossible to push it away. We stayed out there for hours, longer than usual, and when Titan finally flopped down beside me in the grass, I felt this lump in my throat that I couldn't swallow down. I sat there in silence, my hand resting gently on his back, and let the moment stretch out as long as I could. The day before I left was quiet, almost too quiet. My parents helped me pack up the last of my things, checking and double-checking that I had everything I needed. Titan followed us around, his usual energy a little more subdued, like he could sense the shift in the air. I tried to keep it together, smiling, making small talk. But every time I looked at him, I felt my chest tighten. That night, after everything was packed and ready, I sat down next to him one last time. I didn't say much. What could I say? He wouldn't understand words. But I think he understood the feeling. I hugged him tightly, burying my face in his fur, and for a moment, I felt like maybe if I held on long enough, I wouldn't have to let go. The morning of the move came faster than I expected. The house felt heavier somehow, like even the walls knew this was the last time things would feel normal. My parents loaded the car, making sure everything was set, and Titan stood by the door, watching quietly. When it was finally time to leave, I crouched down, looking him in the eyes one last time. There was so much I wanted to say, but instead, I just reached out, stroked his head gently, and whispered, "Be good, okay?" He leaned into my hand, his eyes calm but deep, and I felt tears welling up. I blinked them back, stood up, and walked to the car, not daring to look back until we pulled out of the driveway. As we drove away, I glanced back through the window. Titan stood there, still as ever, watching us go. He didn't chase after the car, didn't bark. He just stood there, his gaze following until we disappeared down the road. That image burned itself into my mind, and even now I can still see it clearly. It felt like leaving behind a part of myself. The ride to school was quiet. My parents chatted now and then, but I mostly stared out the window, lost in my thoughts. I kept replaying all the little moments, the walks, the quiet evenings, the times Titan had been there without me even having to ask. I wondered if he'd miss me as much as I knew I'd miss him. I told myself that moving away was the right thing to do, that it was time to step forward, to grow, to figure out who I was without the safety net of home. But it didn't make it hurt any less. Starting over wasn't easy. The first few weeks at college felt like I was living someone else's life. New faces, new schedules, new everything. But no matter how busy things got, I'd find myself thinking about Titan, wondering what he was doing, if he was lying by the door like he always did, if he noticed I wasn't there. I'd call home and talk to my parents, asking about him, and they'd tell me he was doing fine, that he seemed okay. But a part of me ached anyway, like something was missing. In time, I settled in. I made new friends, found my rhythm, figured out how to stand on my own. But no matter how far I went, no matter how much life changed, that bond with Titan stayed with me. It was quieter now, stretched by distance, but it was still there, solid and unshaken. Leaving home had been hard, harder than I'd wanted to admit, but it taught me something I hadn't realized before. Sometimes moving forward doesn't mean forgetting what you left behind. It means carrying it with you, letting it shape you, and trusting that the connections that really matter won't disappear just because things change. It's strange how sometimes the biggest lessons in life don't come from people or books or school, but from quiet, everyday moments. Looking back now, after everything, after leaving home, after starting this new chapter in my life, I realize how much of what I've learned about love, loyalty, responsibility, and even letting go came from Titan. It wasn't always obvious at the time. A lot of it unfolded slowly, over years of simple, ordinary days that didn't seem special when they were happening. But now, thinking about those days, I can see how much they shaped me. When I was younger, love felt like something simple. It felt like being happy around someone, spending time together, sharing laughs, and feeling good. Titan fit that picture perfectly. He was always there, steady, loyal, ready to sit beside me without expecting anything in return. Loving him came naturally. It didn't feel like something I had to work at. But as I grew older, I started to see that real love, the kind that matters, goes deeper than that. It's not just about the good times, the easy days. It's about responsibility. It's about being there, even when it's inconvenient or hard. Titan taught me that without even trying. Every early morning when he needed a walk, every late night trip to the vet, every time I had to put aside my own plans to take care of him, those moments were small reminders that love is something you show in actions, not just words. Another thing Titan taught me was patience. It's funny, but dogs have this way of slowing you down, making you pay attention to things you'd normally overlook. When Titan was younger, there were plenty of times he tested my patience, chewing up shoes, getting too excited on walks, dragging mud into the house. But each time, I had to remind myself that getting frustrated wouldn't fix anything. He needed time to learn, and I needed to meet him where he was. Over time, that patience extended beyond just dealing with him. It spilled over into other parts of my life: school, friendships, even how I treated myself. I became gentler, more understanding, because I'd learned what it meant to care for something without expecting perfection. But the hardest lesson Titan taught me was how to let go. It's something I didn't fully grasp until the day I left home. For so long, Titan had been part of my everyday life. His quiet presence, the sound of his paws on the floor, the weight of his head resting on my knee. The thought of walking away from that, of not having him there at the end of the day, felt impossible. I spent so much time dreading that moment, wishing I could freeze time and stay in that safe, familiar place forever. But life doesn't work like that. Things change. People grow. Circumstances shift. And as painful as it was, I had to learn that loving something deeply doesn't mean you can hold on to it forever, exactly the way it is. The first few weeks after moving away felt hollow. I'd come back to my dorm after classes, and there'd be this quiet ache in my chest, a space that used to be filled by Titan's steady company. I missed him more than I could say. It wasn't just about missing home or the comfort of routine. It was about missing that piece of myself I felt I'd left behind with him. For a while, I tried to distract myself, throwing myself into schoolwork, making new friends, staying busy. But no matter how full my schedule was, there was always this part of me that felt a little empty. It took me a long time to realize that missing someone, or something, doesn't mean you're stuck. It doesn't mean you can't move forward. What I slowly came to understand was that letting go doesn't erase the love you shared. It doesn't undo all those years of memories, all the quiet afternoons, all the simple, steady moments. It just means you're making space for yourself, for growth, for whatever comes next. And in a way, holding on too tightly can sometimes stop you from becoming who you're meant to be. Titan taught me that. Without ever saying a word, he showed me how to care deeply, but also how to trust that real bonds don't break just because circumstances change. I think about him often. Even now, after time has passed, his presence still lingers in the little things. The way I pause to take a deep breath on a busy day, the way I pay attention to people around me, the way I approach new responsibilities with care. Titan may not physically be beside me anymore, but everything he taught me lives on in how I move through the world. He showed me that love isn't always about holding on tightly. Sometimes it's about knowing when to loosen your grip, to let things evolve naturally, to trust that the connection remains even from a distance. One particular evening sticks out in my mind. It was a few months after I had left home, and I was sitting outside the dorms, watching the sunset. For whatever reason, I thought back to all those evenings Titan and I used to sit on the back steps, just watching the sky change colors, not needing to talk, not needing to do anything but be there together. I felt a wave of homesickness, but it was gentler this time, less sharp, more like a quiet acknowledgement of everything I had been lucky enough to experience. And right then, I realized that missing someone doesn't have to feel heavy. It can be a reminder of something beautiful, something that shaped you. So much of life is about learning to balance love with freedom, learning when to hold close and when to step back. It's not an easy lesson. It's one I'm still figuring out. But Titan gave me a head start. He showed me that true love isn't about control or possession. It's about respect, about giving space for the other to be who they are, while also honoring the bond you share. Whether it's with people or pets, relationships thrive when they're built on trust and understanding, not fear of losing them. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone now, it's this: cherish the connections you have, but don't be afraid to let them change. Growth is natural. Distance doesn't mean the end. And sometimes, letting go is the bravest, kindest thing you can do, for yourself and for those you care about. Titan taught me that in his own quiet, loyal way. He'll always be a part of me, not just as a memory, but as a lesson in how to love fully and let go gracefully.